May 40 here. It's a long time since I've seen a story grip people as much as this submersible that apparently suffered a massive implosion. And Jean-Francois Garapi says, white heterosexual men who've been rejected by a system to the benefit of affirmative action hiring practices must look at failures like that of the Titan sub and laugh their asses off about what science society will become without their contribution. Yeah, so the man, the billionaire behind the sub, very explicitly said he wasn't interested in the contributions of old white men. I'm a 57-year-old white man, so people who demonize me, why would I care about them? Right? If they want to crap on people like me, then why would I go to try to bail them out, so to speak? And we've seen massive numbers of construction failures and other failures from diluting merit as a prime category. So we've had bridges that have been designed by women that have absolutely collapsed. So someone who says, I'm tired of old white men, screw old white men, then why should those who believe in merit have a positive attitude towards you?
A Wi-Fi controller, do you realize that it works until it doesn't work? Do you realize that when the establishment of the connection starts bugging and there's a problem of identification of the remote control, things can totally stop working? I do not use a Wi-Fi controller for my gaming. I do not use any Wi-Fi material for my studio of video recording.
I've been using Wi-Fi headphones for a year, had absolutely no problems with them. But if your life is on the line, yeah, maybe Wi-Fi not such a great idea.
Submarine at 4,000 meters deep, you don't use wireless for anything. Now, it's worse than this. It's that the team that was responsible for this OceanGate Titan were enlightened renegades who were seeing themselves as doing something that was never done before. And you hear how the CEO brags that he didn't want to hire 50-year-old white guys because they're not inspirational. He says, we're doing something that is so different. We're actually less inspired by the submarine business, but more inspired by space travel. Now, as the geek shows in his video, they were not truly taking the lessons from the space world. This guy right here, a genius apparently of submarine, points to all of the flaws in the design. One of the flaws that he points toward is, well, this was a carbon fiber or fiberglass hull, so it's something that crashes and shatters instantly. When it fails big. So it's like either you totally kill the billionaires inside in an instant, or it works and you get back to safety. Second flaw was the wireless control of the joystick, which he pointed out there's all sorts of problems. The problem of the connection stops. Do you have a replacement? Do you have a replacement that doesn't rely on Wi-Fi technology or Bluetooth? All of these questions are very important, absolutely important. Now, he also points that there was a refusal to engage with the regular safety, the people with experience who turn out to be white old guys, white 50-year-old guys. And we'll listen to how the CEO describes how he's looking for a team that is much fresher than this.
CEO of OceanGate, Mr. Stockton Rush, had with Teledyne Marine representatives. Teledyne Marine are making the sonar systems and inertial navigation systems for this vessel. But listen to what he talks about. The CEO talks about hiring people.
Yes, I mean, when I started the business, one of the things you'll find, there are other sub-operators out there, but they typically have gentlemen who are ex-military submariners, and you'll see a whole bunch of 50-year-old white guys.
Yeah, and maybe
one of the things about woke culture is that there are sacred groups such as blacks, gays, the trans, Jews, other minority groups. They can never be criticized, And in an atmosphere where there are sacred groups that are above and beyond criticism, you don't get to a lot of excellence.
If you discard these 50-year-old white guys, you are left with a person operating the ship or constructing the ship that has zero experience in doing them. Perhaps the only available option are white guys coming from the military, and you should hire them.
I wanted our team to be younger, to be inspirational, and I'm not.
And the memes are coming out on Twitter right now. People are showing someone being totally swallowed by the depth of the ocean, but as he dies and is swallowed, he yells, I'm inspired right now. I'm inspired as fuck. Holy shit. Inspired because you hire females, inspired because you hire young people with less experience, inspired because apparently this team didn't feel like following the standards, following the rules of the industry, and in fact had been criticized, as we've seen on the show yesterday. The industry had come out against them and had said, look, these guys, they don't know what they're doing. They're thinking they're innovating, but they're going to make us look very bad. And now you look very bad indeed. Now you look very bad because you discarded the 50-year-old white guys who could have helped you.
Not going to inspire a 16-year-old to go pursue marine technology. But
so now he's saying, well, we weren't really successful at getting 16-year-olds to be fascinated by marine technology, but
25-year-old, who's a sub-pilot or a platform operator or one of our techs can be inspirational. And so
so he looked for a 25-year-old female to operate the platform that is in charge of delivering the vessel and recovering it. Now, so you got your 25-year-old female, so that's inspirational. That will lead people to have confidence. Cute, says Joe Blixham. Yes, the problem of cuteness is that when it comes to following the rules and learning from past experiences, a 25-year-old will not have as much. People were pointing out they're not anything but rich people with more money than they know how to spend. Your average saturation diver is closer to an underwater frontiersman than these tourists are. They live in pods for 28 days, working on the seafloor, flirting with death on a daily basis. Yeah. This is the kind of guy who spends a whole month in these high-depth environment for fixing huge pipelines or whatever it is that.
So remember all those Thai boys from a soccer team who got trapped, all right, by what was it, a flood, and so they were stuck in a cave, right? The entire Thai military, right, the best of Thailand, right, couldn't save them. And Thailand's a huge country, right? It's got tens and tens of millions of people, all right? But all the best of Thailand couldn't save it. Like, Thailand has 70 million people, but they couldn't figure out how to rescue the boys. I had a couple of English divers who had expertise. They were able to figure out how to rescue the boys, and they did rescue the boys, right? So 2 old white English divers did what 70 million Thai could not.
That they're doing. These guys are the real thing. These guys are the frontiersmen. I fully agree with this. The other guys, the guys who crushed in the billionaire submarine, those are tourists. Those are tourists who are trying to do something spectacular, and they're paying the price for it. And as I was saying earlier in the show, as a white guy who has high IQ, as a white guy who would have had definitely the level of intelligence to become an engineer, although I'm not an engineer, I'm tired of society rejecting people like me. And I will laugh my ass off every time you guys die. under a female controller, under a diversity hierarchy. I will laugh my ass off when your planes catch fire, when your stairs don't work, and when your buildings crumble. I will fucking laugh my ass off, and I don't give a shit. You guys have discarded from society the only people who have been showing through history that they were capable of doing absolutely amazing things, of challenging the limits of history, of going where no one has gone. You have dismissed us because you want your little image, your little picture with the female controller of your fucking platform. You can fucking die under 4,000 feet of water. I don't give a shit. That is my attitude. You get what you fucking deserve. That is what we should retain from this experience.
And why would you expect anyone to react differently? All right, you want to demonize a group such as white men, then why would you expect them to want to come to your rescue?
These billionaires, I'm not going to drop a tear for them. Now, as I was saying earlier, the saddest fucking thing is that one of these idiot rich businessmen has brought his son on this ridiculous adventure. It's like, when you are old, it's okay to die. It's okay to take a massive risk, and it's okay to be Braveheart style, going to war, putting yourself at threat, because when you die, you're helping your children survive, you're helping your wife.
Okay, so JFKRP makes some tough points, hard points, but I think ultimately fair and important points. All right, let's go to Decoding the Gurus, a Patreon-only discussion here about how do you develop a good epistemic network.
Kind of lost, it seems to me. So, what?
I want to just mention, though, that, like, I agree with you about all the stuff that you're going to say about Lost Boys and whatever, but I also want to make clear to Michael that, like, I think it's perfectly possible to listen to Sam Harris, agree with a whole bunch he says, and be a perfectly normal, reasonable person.
Yeah. No, I'm thinking of the people.
So
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that when sometimes recently I've been striking people with inexplicable things, like believing all the conspiracy theories, basically thinking that the Ukraine thing is a big scam and Putin's a hero. It's not just one thing. Like, listen to Sam Harris. Like, it's I wasn't thinking of Sam anyway, but it's the constellation of weird beliefs, and you can cast it as in a political dimension, but actually these people are not. It's not. You can't understand it through politics. You have to understand it through kind of conspiratorial psychological vulnerability. Yeah.
Well,
there was a book I read recently. I don't know if you've read it. It's by David McCraney called How Minds Change. And so I read that a little while ago, and that combined with your podcast and talking with other experts in whatever field. So the Huberman, for example, I would speak to a physiotherapist or somebody in physical science, but that combined seems to inoculate me pretty well. And then occasionally one slips through, and then I have to go into what I think I've mentioned. I think I've heard you mention, Matt, about having a network that you go out to be able to then use that network to understand what on earth is going on in a particular area if you aren't an expert. And then I guess then I begin to think about all the other people that don't have that network, haven't read those books, aren't listening to you, and it makes me very sad.
Yeah. The epistemic network thing is, I think, really key to understanding it. Like you don't the theme out, like, amongst the people that are into the discourse and free speech and open debate, and we're going to figure this stuff out ourselves, do your own research. Like, they have this sort of heuristic that, you're going to go to the primary sources, going to go through the data on whatever the topic is, and you're going to, use your big science brain to go through it, look at the atmospheric records in some Antarctic monitoring station, and figure out what's going on with climate change, right? And that's not how having an accurate worldview works, right? Because there's just too much information, knowledge, pertinent stuff in the world, and even a professional researcher, professional scientist cannot. There's not enough hours in the day, right, to go through all that shit. Everyone has to specialize. So the way to have accurate worldviews, I think, is all about maintaining a healthy epistemic network.
Okay, so what are the components of a healthy epistemic network? Epistemic means, how do we know what we know? So how can you discern what is true from what is false? Well, the single most replicable study in social sciences is the predictive and explanatory power of IQ differences among groups. So different groups have different levels of IQ, and their life results largely fall in alignment with these differences. And you can pretty much tell what someone's potential is by age 5 or 6, giving them a Raven's Matrices IQ test. And these two academics from Decoding the Gurus, they don't want regular people talking about IQ. They just want IQ left only to the experts who don't really talk about it publicly when it's the single easiest tool for understanding how the world works, but they don't want you to have it. So I would say that's really bad epistemics. Like someone who wants to deny people the single most easy, predictive, explanatory tool for understanding the world around them, right? The predictive power of IQ differences between groups, right? That's not someone who's particularly devoted to truth or to epistemics. Right? We're talking here two academics who put a far greater premium on their careers and on their personal comfort and just like feeling like they're righteous, right? While they pour scorn on those who notice obvious differences, that different peoples have different gifts, right? Understanding that different peoples have different gifts, I think, is kind of the basics for beginning to understand the world around you. So you should give priority to theories and thinkers that have replication, right? Such as different groups of different gifts, different levels of IQ will have different life outcomes, right? Different levels of IQ has both predictive and explanatory power. So there's no need to fear a challenge, right? The idea that different groups have different gifts, you can challenge that, a million ways to Sunday. I'd be happy to, take on those challenges. So your epistemic networks also should enable you and encourage you to develop the best possible relations with everyone. As your epistemics improve, meaning that your ability to discern what is true from what is false, your life should improve. If your life's not improving, your ability to discern what is true from what is false is, not so good, right? You don't want your worldview to be based upon, hot takes that get your juices flowing, right? Something that just feels good and, sounds really profound, but falls apart upon analysis, and that's not good epistemics. You also have to understand that ties bind and blind. So it's great to belong to a community. It's great to have ties. It's great to have allegiances, but if you want to think clearly, you have to kind of step outside the dance, step outside of your ties and try to look at things objectively. And everyone has a hero story, right? Understand the incentives that people work under. For example, if the people pushing climate change legislation, have the same, identical left-wing agenda, even if there was no such thing as climate change, they'd still be pushing this same left-wing agenda, control of people's choices and more power to big government. Then you have to be appropriately suspicious of their claims. And when you get an incredibly complicated topic like climate change, there are so many variables, there are so many areas of specialization. Nobody is a master of climate change science. Someone can't acknowledge basic truths such as different peoples have different gifts, all right? They're not much use for understanding reality. If your fear of getting canceled forces you to deny the bleedingly obvious, the blindingly obvious, you're not much of a source for truth, right? 12-year-old boys can easily beat the greatest female athletes. So don't tell me how amazing women's sports are, that they deserve identical pay to higher performing men. If you can't acknowledge these basic significant differences between men and women, between different groups, you are of no use for understanding life. Right, back to decoding the groups.
So that's the hard bit, right? Because it involves figuring out what sources to trust and what sources to trust on what topics. Like as Chris sort of lightheartedly said, Elijah Yudkowsky could be great on Harry Potter fan fiction, right? Like if that was the thing you wanted to figure out about, he could be a great source on that. Like not everyone's a great source on everything, and some people are a good source for a while and actually become a terrible source. Like that, who's that UK nurse guy? What's his name?
John Campbell.
John Campbell. Yeah. So figure like the good thing is if you have a healthy epistemic network and maybe say John Campbell was in it, right? So a source you trusted, right? And if the rest of your network's pretty good, then you will have the wherewithal to notice when he's bullshitting you, right? And you can go, right, he's not good, I'm going to drop him. But if you've got a bad epistemic network, right? You listen to Joe Rogan, you listen to these other people, and you trust all these people, then it all fits, right? You've got no reference point to figure out that it's bullshit. So it's hard. It's really hard for people that are lost like that.
I'm still, I spoke to, like I said, a guy that's a Jordan Peterson fan, and he was very reasonable and very decent having a conversation with. But he had that view about debates. Like we ended up, I think, talking about climate change, and he wanted there to be a debate where you have an advocate for climate change and Bjorn Lomborg on the other side, and then he's like, if this is multiple hours and they go back and forth, I'd be open to change my mind. And it's just like that's a very, I was trying to explain to him, but that doesn't actually alter at all the.
Right, that's Chris Kavanaugh speaking there, and that's right. Debates are entertaining. They're not a good method for discerning what is true from what is false.
Evidence, right? Like it's not. That's like a performance debate, but the actual evidence exists completely independent from that discourse. But there's just a difference in heuristics because a lot of the way that he seemed to regard, how you should formulate your views is through, like kind of long form podcasts and debates. Whereas
so heuristics means an approximation of truth. Like, what are some basic heuristics? So if you see a bunch of people running, right, in sheer fear and panic, good heuristic would be to join them, because if there's a large enough group of people running away in fear and panic, in all likelihood there's probably some rational reason to be running away in fear and panic. So heuristics means a method that yields a rough approximation of the truth and is reasonably effective.
That's a terrible heuristic for science. Fine for entertainment. And I think with like Sam Harris or someone like that, I actually think there's stuff that Sam's good on and is a good speaker, kind of speaks clearly and thoughtfully about stuff. And other people I would put in that category would include Pinker, Haidt, so on. But they're also like, they all to some extent suffer from the narcissism aspect, where they're really, really sure that their worldview and perspective on issues is like really clear. And
so a normal person doesn't yearn for attention. All right. You encounter an intellectual, a thinker, all right, a professor who's just yearning for your attention and to develop a parasocial relationship with you, right? That person's not going to be a good source for truth.
But like Sam Harris, that time where he debated some specialist in airport security about racial profiling, and the guy was constantly telling him, I know that you think it would work, but it doesn't. Like, it wouldn't work.
Okay, so every hijacking in the past, almost 45, 50 years has been by a Muslim. So I would venture that that's a fairly decent heuristic. All right, so doing some profiling, right, seems to me like when it comes to airline safety, pretty good idea.
And the way that you're thinking about it is too simplistic. It would be counterproductive for what you're thinking about. But Sam was just like very, very certain that he was right, even though.
If you're yearning for attention, Leponius, you're not a liar. You're just not a reliable source of truth, because you will be so strongly incentivized to say whatever will get you what you most want, such as attention, that you will sell out what is true for what meets your needs.
He's done nothing with, like managing security, or like, and this person has an entire career on that topic. But yeah, and same thing again, with.
Okay, you have to understand what are the incentives that the people are operating under. All right, so if you have a prestigious position, all right, you are going to get canceled if you violate certain boundaries of political correctness. So the experts frequently have prestigious positions. You have to understand what are the incentives that they are operating under, and that can help you decide how seriously should you take what they're saying. If they will get canceled for simply revealing basic truths, all right, you should treat them with appropriate skepticism. Right? Understand the incentives that the people operate. I'm not going to say anything that is going to destroy my life in Orthodox Judaism. Right? So if I have a choice between telling the truth, telling harsh truths, and enjoying my life in Orthodox Judaism, I'm going to choose enjoying my life in Orthodox Judaism. Ergo, I'm not necessarily the greatest, most objective source of truth in the world with regard to anything that could disrupt my comfy little life in Orthodox Judaism.
With the lab leak and that kind of stuff. So, but I think it's wrong for people to kind of take somebody liking Sam Harris's content or whatever as an indication that they're a bad thinker, because it very much depends on what topic and how you're taking Sam. Like, his opinions on meditation are relatively mainstream amongst Western Buddhists. So, you just. Yeah, that's, if you've got an issue with his take, you probably have an issue with a lot of Western Buddhism, which I do, but other people don't. So yeah. But cheers for the question, Michael, and sorry for our waffly answers.
I appreciate it.
And Matt, we had you guys keep posting your comments, Matt included, in the question.
Okay, let me get another little excerpt here on how do academics make money. Right, this is a good discussion.
Into one of the sense maker types recently, and I know you need to go soon, Matt, so I'll keep it very brief. But just they're very nice, and they were, it was pleasant conversation, except when we were talking about Alex Jones and stuff. But there was a part where I was saying, but look, fundamentally, you view like materialism and reductionism in science as removing the magic from the world, right? Like it makes it a dull, grey, not exciting place to just be about material things. And they were like, yes, that's it. You're just you're reducing everything to things, and like.
Dooovid, how's it going, bro?
Baruch Hashem.
It was an amazing show last night. You're just incredibly honest. It was incredibly compelling. How are you doing the day after?
Oh, thank God, nothing special.
Okay, so it wasn't too wrenching for you.
No, I mean, I guess I try to be honest with myself, so I guess just trying to share it didn't change much.
Okay, so I was thinking about the topic of how do you develop, good epistemic networks so that you can more effectively distinguish that which is good from, that which is true from that which is false. And you had some thoughts I noted in our little chat about epistemic community. Do you want to share any thoughts?
Oh yeah, sure. Are you live actually?
Yes, we're live.
Okay, because I just can't find you anywhere.
I'm on Lucas Back on my Lucas Back channel.
Okay. Yeah, so it was a little random because yeah, I was familiar with the term because I had originally studied database management, and I guess like epistemic networks, I believe derives from data science in terms of like information integrity or something like that. And then so I was looking that up to see what you meant by it, and I saw there's also like a concept of an epistemic community, which I guess epistemic just means knowledge.
Yeah.
And so there's look at the name of the thinker that was the main thinker in epistemic community on that Wikipedia link, but it was basically just related to expertise and deciphering who the experts are, how to get proper feedback. I guess Peter Haas was the main expert from University of Massachusetts Amherst on epistemic communities.
But did you have any thoughts on how one develops epistemic network so that you have a better grasp on what's true versus what's false?
Yeah, I guess there should be multiple methods. So I mean, because it's a network, it involves feedback, and it involves testing your perceptions against other perceptions, and then some sort of dynamic of understanding whose perceptions are more expert or better than others. Not just, that you could get feedback from anybody, but getting feedback from an expert. So if you want, like the various methods of attempting to create an expert network, and then the likelihood that people are only experts in small fields. So I think we talked maybe it was over a month ago about like taking instruction. So we both agreed that you say take instruction when you want to know how to do something technical, and so epistemic networking and feedback in technical things is more easy, because you could say like a technical certification, whether someone knows how to run a program or operate some sort of machinery, that's easier to decipher it, and then just you learn from them or get feedback from them. As where in life it's much more difficult. And then if we eventually bring the conversation to Judaism, you say, well, you might have what you call like an expert on Judaism, as opposed to people who have community influence and power, and those people with community influence and power may not actually have expertise, and that creates mixed signals where you have different feedback loops about what you should be doing or how you should acquire the right path or expertise.
Yeah, and so someone, say, with an expertise in Talmud isn't necessarily filled with expertise in areas of common sense and how to, apply Talmudic discussions to today. So someone may, have a teaching from the Talmud or the ongoing rabbinic tradition that if an ordinary Orthodox Jew applied it to his life, it might be an absolute disaster. So even though the Torah teaches 1,000 times the Torah knowledge of the person that he's instructing, his advice, depending on the situation, can be completely disastrous. So knowing Torah makes you an expert in Torah doesn't necessarily make you an expert in instructing someone else in a completely different situation that's completely foreign to you. How they then should apply that Talmudic knowledge. Any thoughts?
Yeah, and so if you take it back to the source of the, I think, epistemic networking coming out of computer database management, where you could have reasonable assessments of data quality, where you have all sorts of data coming from various methods, and there's algorithms, and it's probably something like the AI and machine learning and like Chat GPT use this various technology, and probably even the terminology of epistemic networking for, I think the terminology is also data quality. And so in like a Jewish network, it's hard to assess data quality in the sense where you were like, well, I just want to know what the books say, or I want to know some sort of scholarly opinion, or I want to listen to the smartest person versus, well, what do people actually do? Like we were arguing yesterday about whether we're more valuable as non-Jews to Jews from the community, and you're like, well, you could ask any Orthodox rabbi and they would disagree. But I was like, yeah, but what would be the sentiment among the common Orthodox Jew? And you seem to agree that it's possible that the common Orthodox Jew, even a sizable proportion, would disagree, even something that would be consensus among the Orthodox rabbis. So how do you network, and how do you weigh those various things where you're going to have one level of expertise, like what's the reason why all the rabbis would be in consensus on this? However, the followers of the rabbi or the communities would dismiss the rabbinic consensus about it. And you were talking about IQ earlier also, that the extent is IQ is indicative of success in many paths, although there's many downfalls to IQ. And I think you've mentioned many times it's hard for someone to communicate with someone 2 standard deviations lower. So most great communicators, leaders, tend to be, I don't know, maybe in like the 120 to 140 range, because people's genius level have a hard time communicating to the masses. So you might have an intermediary, someone between like 120, 140, who could understand what the geniuses are saying, but then be a leader to the masses of common people, probably in Hollywood also, that some of the most successful, popular people probably range in like the 120, 130 IQ range, and they might be able to listen and take instruction from geniuses that are not able to connect to the masses that the stars are able to connect to.
One thing I notice that people like us have in common with rabbis, with preachers, with priests, with gurus, with pundits, with yoga teachers, with influencers in general, is that everyone seems to be heavily driven by increasing their own importance. So, rabbis want you to follow their direction. Priests and preachers want you to follow their direction. Yoga teachers want you to follow their direction. YouTubers and pundits and podcasters want you to tune in to hear their perspectives, which they believe will help you unlock life and be more successful in life. And so this kind of leads people to make go in a lot of self-aggrandizing directions. So I think to appropriately decode people who are trying to have an influence on you, it's important to ask, what are the incentives that they're operating under. So Dennis Prager can say on his nationally syndicated radio show that we're in a civil war, right? A non-shooting civil war, which of course no non-shooting civil war is actually a civil war, but he's telling you something that you wouldn't see on your own. So when the YouTuber or the rabbi, the priest, the preacher, the yoga teacher, tells you about something that you cannot see with your own eyes, in large part it is a thrust for increased importance for them, because they are the ones who can teach you about the things that you can't see. So until one recognizes the genre that someone's working in, the incentives that they're working under, it's very easy to get caught up in other people's thrusting for importance. And people will use you, whether they're rabbis or priests or yoga teachers, frequently to aggrandize themselves. They want to hook you in and then turn you into fodder for their own self-aggrandizement. So it's quite the rare public personality, quite the rare rabbi or preacher who is able to relate to you, as individual to individual, and not just as another number, another viewer, another member of the congregation, another donor to add to their own sense of aggrandizement. Anything there that you want to comment on, Dooovid?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, using like the guru, the Hindu terminology, maybe people who are good at that live in the moment. So even rabbis, but specifically that you're using the guru, the Hindu terminology might point to something superior to the Eastern teachings of being in the present moment fully. And therefore, the person feels that whoever they're speaking to, even though they might be famous or a leader of many people, is fully giving their attention to them. And that might actually be accurate, that there might, I can see, actually probably rabbis might be worse at it, saying that's probably why the Eastern terminology guru is used. But I've met many people that use the terminology being fully present in the moment and appear to be giving their full attention to the individual, no matter what the circumstance. And even if the person might be famous or you have millions of followers, that the person's like, no, this person clearly knew and understood me, at least at that moment. And I have more to say, but if you had a comment on that aspect of it.
I'm still thinking about this. So certainly someone can be in it for self-aggrandizement and still have something to offer you, but it came as a very painful series of realizations for me when many of the religious leaders that I most looked up to, I started to recognize that they were primarily relating to people as fodder for their own aggrandizement. So I'll turn it back to you, and I'll think more about what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, it could be actually it's more con men that would be good at it, because like a rabbi would not likely necessarily be the person who would be there and fully in the moment and giving their full attention to you, because the rabbi has that, like, the world weighs on my shoulders. And so obviously they can't give their full attention to you because they have the worries, and that would come out in the expression of your communications with like a rabbi or a business leader or something like that. That would almost be irresponsible for the person to be there fully in the moment with you and not have at least a decent amount of their attention focused to their responsibilities, as opposed to you maybe entertainers that in reality don't have that many responsibilities, or con men that could appear to just they are giving you their full attention, but they're using it to trick you because they know that usually people don't have full attention diverted to them, and they could fool you that they this person must really care about me or must really think that I'm special. And I mean, if you had comments on that and want
I'll jump in. I mean, I think it's absolutely absurd to think that anyone is going to devote their full attention to you. I've certainly never expected that, no wanted that from a rabbi. What I'm talking about is the charismatic rabbi who I thought was speaking essentially in the words of God, the words of Torah, and I find out that they are sexual predators, that they are financial predators, that they are predators on people's souls, that they take advantage of their religious position to screw people over socially, religiously, sexually, financially. And that's what I've seen, that's what I've experienced, and that's what I found disturbing. People who were wrapping themselves in the mantle of Torah, but they were essentially using Torah to get laid and paid. I don't know if you've had those experiences.
Well, a handful of times, but no, I mean, God forbid, most of the rabbis that I dealt with were relatively quite dedicated. And I mean, it might also go back to the point about being there in the moment, that dedicated rabbis are communal people. They're always in front of a crowd, and they don't really have the opportunity for that type of behavior. And when you speak to the rabbi, like you don't expect the rabbi to give your full attention, and the rabbi is somewhat symbolic of your connection to the community, because the rabbi I mean, it depends on there's various types of rabbis, but like a pastoral rabbi or a congregational rabbi, where the rabbi obviously is dealing with the people all the time. But I mean, corruption's, yeah, obviously, you'll common in Rampart, and you'll certainly in Los Angeles, it's probably, I don't know if it's worse, but saying that in Brooklyn, God forbid, there's numerous rabbis that have more with child molestation. I would say like affairs or women is less likely, because child molestation, God forbid, might be something that they would be more likely to get away with. But even like women in improper behaviors. But I think in the more Heimish communities, you're almost never alone. People have big families. There's always eyes on you. And as you move up in the rabbinic communal affairs, you're used to always having eyes on you. And improper behavior largely has to be eliminated. The process of character refinement, and the heart may not be refined, but at least the appearance of behaving properly. Rabbi Balkany, God forbid, I remember him saying shortly before he went to prison, the brother-in-law of Ravashkin, who went to prison for the agri-processors, he said one moment of pride could bring you down. So when you're a public person and you're always speaking in front of crowds, there's always lines of people waiting to speak to you, so on and so on, that it just takes one thing for you to slip. And so I would have to say I don't think that's actually the norm for people in those positions to engage in that type of behavior.
And another thing I find distasteful for many people in a public position is when they misunderstand the source of their authority. So I noticed with a lot of rabbis, for example, pulpit rabbis, congregational rabbis, they think that because someone joined their synagogue, they are choosing that rabbi to be their spiritual leader. And that is not my experience. Most Jews don't choose a rabbi on the basis of making that congregational rabbi their spiritual leader. They choose a synagogue based on the number of friends that go there. Now, a significant number of Jews do choose a synagogue on the basis of making that rabbi their spiritual leader, but I would say they're probably outnumbered 10-1, as opposed to those Jews who choose a synagogue on the basis of friends and family who go there. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, so in an Orthodox community, most congregations have board of directors, and the rabbis are hired, and the congregation has already existed for multiple generations, and the rabbi might be charismatic a little bit, but it's more bureaucratic and organizational, and the rabbi doesn't have all that much authority, or it's within a hierarchy of the community leaders and wealthy people, or consensus. And in a larger area like Jerusalem or Brooklyn, probably LA, I'm not sure, Detroit's probably not big enough that there's not really any charismatic rabbis where people will choose to become a follower of a specific charismatic rabbi, where it's like, I want more than my local synagogue or the synagogues that have to offer. So they choose to seek out charismatic rabbis, and those charismatic rabbis build up like a cultish type following. So I was part of a few charismatic rabbis who built up their own like cultish following and had their own events, and some of them eventually built up their own communities, and with that maybe became more normalized. I don't know if that's similar like that in LA, where there are a handful of charismatic rabbis, and if you're going to like your local congregations, like, Luke, did you hear about this rabbi so and so? And then you go to the event and he has kind of like a cult following, and people from all different type places are joining this kind of like cultic movement.
Yeah, that's true. People, those rabbis who have the biggest following tend to not be particularly bright. They don't tend to be the rabbis. Thinking about the late Lord Jonathan Sacks. All right, we're talking about someone who's middle brow, like someone who's far from being a Torah scholar, just someone who speaks in a beautiful English accent and has read a lot of books, but is no Talmud Chacham, is no Talmudic sage, and so rabbi, I mean, particularly the Sephardim, follow some really dim rabbis on YouTube. So Orthodox Jews, I guess, like anyone else, they, by and large, they follow people who are not the brightest and not the best, but who kind of pump out a message that moves people. So yeah, a lot of Orthodox Jews, like Menace Friedman, who again, no rabbi's rabbi, just someone who's they got the gift of the gab, but not exactly some Talmudic sage. Jonathan Sachs, and then those crazy low IQ Sephardic rabbis are on YouTube all the time and getting tons of attention for the inflammatory things that they're saying. So by and large, I have not noted that Orthodox Jews tend to revere the best and the brightest among the Rebbeim. Instead, they go for frequently rabble rousers. Any thoughts, Dooovid?
Well, this might circle back to what I want to get back to with expertise and intelligence in smaller circles, but related to the Orthodox Jewish charismatic rabbis, certainly in the Hasidic world, it would be more about singing and ecstatic prayer. And so like in Brooklyn or Israel, like that would include like really cultic things like sitting around in dark rooms and singing and people crying and people giving like really charismatic speeches, fiery speeches, and ecstatic prayer, longer prayer. So maybe LA would have like you said, if you like a Rebbe's coming to town and the prayer is going to be ecstatic, or you have like a Karlbach minyan, and usually people are more reserved, and then you're going to go and everyone's going to get like you've talked about, all of a sudden there's going to be everyone's arms is going to be over each other's shoulders and everyone's going to be dancing and ecstatically praying, and you might do that like a few times a year and feel energized. But to so to say, join a rabbi who leads that kind of ecstatic singing and prayer regularly, those probably are not your brightest rabbis. But they're there, within Judaism, because prayer is such a regular part of it, and prayer becomes kind of like dull and repetitive, and so charismatic leaders in Orthodox Judaism come together from ecstatic singing and prayer. I don't know if you'd see it like that.
That's absolutely right. The Hasidic rabbis with the largest followings are not the greatest Torah scholars, and the late Lubavitcher Rebbe would not have ranked in his lifetime among the top 100 Chabad Lubavitch Torah scholars. He was a man of tremendous gifts, but he wouldn't have ranked in the top 100 Lubavitch Torah scholars. And so to the Hasidic Rebbes with the largest followings, right? They're not rabbis. They're not great Torah scholars. They're gifted at creating certain feelings of awe and devotion among their followers. But most normal people are not yearning for attention, right? It takes a special, there's something kind of usually off about most people who become famous, whether as a Hasidic rabbi or as an actor. There's a deep yearning for attention that most normal people don't have. Any thoughts, Dooovid?
Yeah, so I put it back because I think it ties back to the general thing about expertise and data quality and IQ, that in Orthodox Jewish circles you also have charismatic genius rabbis that recruit very smart people, and I was part of a few of those, and they're not like necessarily like singing and ecstatic. They're more elite groups of nerds that read books. And in the extent of when I was in Jerusalem, I went to Reb Spiemeier Zilberberg, who was, he was ecstatic, and people went and he sang nicely and he spoke very fiery, and he was pretty smart, but he wasn't genius level. But he was relatively scholarly, and the people who liked him and went to him were more likely to be more scholarly than their peers. They were the people that in their spare time would have read Kabbalistic and Hasidic texts, and it was an intellectual movement. And then, I also went to Rev Daniel Frisch, who wrote a commentary on the Zohar, and Rev Itchy Meir Morgenstern, who had like a little Kabbalah circle. And these were not like popular charismatic movements. They were basically small niche groups of of geeks who wanted to learn Kabbalah, I guess, and but it was more like an intellectual reading circle, although also like meditative, and then people would get together and try to take chanting and prayer really seriously. But it wouldn't have been something that would have been popular among the masses, and there would have been high barriers to entry, mainly in terms of reading and mastering immense levels of text. And I think that would probably relate back to general like epistemic network and expertise in general, where if you're an engineer, a scientist, or maybe even something in the liberal arts, you could confidently say like you're just not going to understand this. Like, I'm a smart guy and I spent 10 years of my life studying this stuff. I read hundreds of books, I worked through hundreds of problems. Very few people are probably capable of understanding it, and even if you are smart and talented and want to understand it, you would have to put large amounts of work into it, and therefore you have networks of experts, which would mainly be professional, because usually in the US, eventually you would get certified and credentialed, and you would make large sums of money, whether it's a lawyer, engineer, doctor, and even if it's like a professor in colloquiums of small groups. So like on YouTube, like it's pyramidal, where you could even put in the Greek terms the logos, ethos, pathos, where at the expert level, it's almost all logos. It's all instruction, um, no appeal to emotion at all, even very little ethos appeal to authority of any kind. It's just straight equation, information. You did the homework or not. You understand what's talking about or not. And if it's like Elon Musk and groups of engineers or technology conferences, it's really you either know it or you don't. And it's known that the amount of extreme effort that even great minds would have to spend years of their time to have a comprehension expertise level. And then you have the epistemic network that is relatively small of just the experts, and it's not expected that you're going to have any fame or glory. And the masses probably will never respect you, like especially in technology engineering circles. And so to say, that's why you make the big bucks. So if you're in engineering, you're saying, well, um, like, I'm a geek, I'm a nerd. I might find a fellow circle of nerds and geeks that we talk about, or nerd geek stuff that most people would never understand and never care to do the work to understand. But then also there's the way to make money off of it. And then if you do need my service, I'm going to charge you thousands, tens of thousands of dollars for it.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. Okay, I'm just going to do a fairly short show for tonight. So, any final words this evening, Dooovid?
Yeah, I appreciate the topic. And Judaism's more difficult to perceived expertise as opposed to technical stuff, where it's more like it's more easy to differentiate. If you have a bunch of rabbis and like, oh, this guy's mastered Talmud and all the books and Kabbalah text, as opposed to like engineering or some technical thing to say like this guy's an expert. I think the engineering and technical know-how, and I think it's also interesting to the resignation where you say, well, IQ is predictive, but I'm not sure if high intelligent people are necessarily popular. I think they're more likely to fall into small networks of friends and groups, come up with a method to monetize their expertise, and then become like elitist and within an echo chamber. And that goes back to the first point I mentioned, where I think a lot of the most successful people might have IQs in the range of like 120 to 130, and they're capable of listening and understanding to the geniuses and then relating it to the masses, as where the real geniuses and experts uh, are almost completely unable to relate, and usually they're lucky even to be able to monetize and have like a network of experts where they could monetize it. And it'd be interesting to compare that to Judaism, because I do think you have an elite of um, experts in Judaism that really know the books, like the halakhic rulers, or people that have been understood to have mastered the books, that are more low key, and the popular rabbis that are shepherds to the masses. They're the ones who respect these low-key rabbis and their scholarship is where the masses, without the the popular rabbis voluntarily subjugating themselves to the people who've in theory acquired the expertise. And it may not actually be that way. There may not actually be a proper hierarchy of that in Judaism. So I think these are definitely interesting topics. And I've been researching this in what I call the science of expertise. And this question of how do you verify that such a thing is expertise? How do you mark it? You could say like IQ, he's measured, he's smart, but the difference between like Alexander technique or something like that, where there might be a certification process, a test, and someone who some reasonable method to differentiate how well the levels of knowledge and expertise are on the issue. So this definitely one of the more interesting things I find to talk about.
Okay, Dooovid, great to catch up with you. We'll do it again another evening. So take care for tonight.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. I just want to play a little bit more here from Decoding the Gurus, talking about how do academics make their money.
It's just like a little bit. The world would be lovely if it was full of fairies and demons and like wizards conducting magic in caves. But it's not real. That's the problem. So that's why I have to spoil the fun. But yeah, so I'm not saying Francis Collins wants like wizards and dragons to be real, but just there might be some parallel in some way there.
Yeah. One of the things that I kind of learned is that like not all questions, like you can pose a lot of questions, but just because you can pose a question doesn't mean that it has like an answer. You can, and it may make intuitive sense that it should have an answer. Like you can ask what happened before the Big Bang. Now it
but you can't.
But if the current models are correct, then that's just an ill-posed question. It actually, the question doesn't make sense. So probably a lot of these questions, like what's the nature of consciousness, it's probably just a question that doesn't make sense. That it feels like it should be answerable to us, but it just isn't. It's not a well-posed question.
Yeah, Kirsten, one thing I think Matt and I have come across is like whether you're willing to tolerate that. Like I feel a little bit that some people that lean towards spirituality want there to be a purpose and a meaning and like something special in the
tolerance for disconnect, maybe.
Yeah. They don't want it to just be this. like that's not
connect. Or like I always want to. That's why I'm having trouble learning. I didn't go back to uni and learning because I keep going. No, I find there's a typo here. There's I just can't put it in my brain. I've got to actually make room for it in my brain.
Yeah, I'd say the search for meaning is certainly intoxicating.
Don't come to us for meaning. That's not that's we can't.
Jordan Hall. Jordan Hall's the man.
I had a lot of questions about how academics make money.
Look, if you're thirsty for meaning, that's a big warning sign that something's terribly wrong with your life. You should be able to get all the meaning that you need from your family, not your family, your extended family, your friends, your community, your interests, your social circle, your profession. Right? Once you've got this deep thirst for meaning, it's a big flashing warning sign that something's really wrong in your life. And people who come along, promising you meaning, they're just as likely to do you harm as good.
Oh,
is that podcast? Is that?
No, they don't make money from podcasts, not enough, but they make money from salaries.
Yeah, we get paid. It's mainly the salary from the university.
The majority of them don't get paid that well, but it's
like I'm doing this other external work. I'm just signing the contract today for whatever, and I just give all the money to the university, and then they use it to pay my salary a little bit. So that's how normal academics live. But not
sometimes academics get money from.
They're going to get looking for grants for the uni and.
Oh, you're talking about research funding.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, so,
but Matt, the research funding or the grant thing can give you extra money, but in most occasions is for the project, and if it's paying you a salary, it's buying you out of your university salary. So you don't need to teach for X amount of years, but because you give the university the money to hire someone else to replace you. So yeah.
Basically, you work for the university. When you get grant money, technically it all goes to the university, but then you get to use it to do some research, or the university might use it to pay your salary or pay for a postdoc salary or something. I mean, as Adam said, they're badly treated in the US, where the salaries are often just for 9 months, and then the other months get taken. Well, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's not that bad, but that's not how it works in Australia.
When people say that Kennedy got 10 million from Jack Dorsey, which he did, but he didn't get it, right? They view that as Kennedy got given a 10 million salary. He didn't. He got a 10 million endowment for a center that he set up. And sure, that could pay a salary for, X amount of years or whatever. But assuming he's got postdocs and university overheads and stuff, it actually ends up being much less, right? You can make a lot more from just being a guru selling supplements than you can in most academic things. But like Candy probably makes enough from like public appearances and speaker fees. And if you're a celebrity academic, it's different.
Yeah, I think that might.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's John Carroll or somebody like that might have a different deal.
Yeah, he's a pretty big deal. Hey, I listen to a lot of his stuff. He's
Yeah.
all right.
Good.
Yeah.
He's all right, I think. Yeah.
Do I think that the elite derive their sense of meaning and purpose in life from community, family, and friends? Well, precisely because the elite are extraordinarily talented and gifted at things, they have much less need to get their sense of meaning from community, family, and friends. But most people are not extraordinary painters. Most people are not CEOs. Most people don't have jobs that fill them up, right? Most people do jobs that they are not particularly fond of. But if you're elite, all right, you have millions of dollars, you fly all around the world, you get to pursue your hobbies, you get to socialize with fellow elites. So they have much more access to these more esoteric sources of meaning, such as job, status, going to parties with other power players, feeling like they're influencing the world, that they are making a difference in the world. Most people can't realistically believe that they're making some significant difference in the world. But if you're elite and let's say you have the ability to give away millions of dollars, right, you can have many, opportunities to, fill yourself up with your pursuits, with your hobbies, with your passions. You can have all sorts of opportunities that ordinary people just won't have.
He's very relaxing to listen to.
So most people get their hero system from their community. If you're an extraordinary YouTuber, if you're an extraordinary podcaster, you're an extraordinary painter or writer or athlete or dancer or choreographer, right? You can very likely get a majority of your meaning from your extraordinary talents and abilities. But most people can't even delude themselves into thinking that they have extraordinary talents. Ergo, most people get their sense of meaning from their family, extended family, and community. Now, if you have a 1 in a million talent with writing or painting or YouTubing, then you'll very likely get your meaning from there.
But I think the money is really important. Like the money, like I've noticed this in just seeing how other people for whom being a public personality of any description is their main source of income, then it totally understandably drives their decision making. And if you want to ask why did Lex Fridman straight away invite RFK Jr. onto his podcast, it's because he's all about making his podcast as big as possible, and he does that by getting whoever is in the news at the moment, whoever's a controversial figure, on. Like that. If you want to understand their behavior, a lot of the time it's just that. And I got to go to my meeting. It's about research money, actually. So yeah,
Get it, Matt. Do it.
Get it.
Okay, that's it.